What would it take to make the NDA on their own walk away?
Because they're a very important part of this. The regulators have published in a document called Guidance on the Requirements for Authorisation for a Deep Geological Disposal Facility what they expect to see in our safety justification for a geological disposal facility. So in the end, what would cause us to walk away and what would cause the regulators to force us to walk away is if we couldn't make a safety case. In other words, if we couldn't justify that the facility we're proposing to build was safe. So safety is absolutely paramount. And as I've also said, developing this in conjunction with and with the support of the host community and the broader community is also very important to us. But as an absolute bottom line, the test of this, as it is with a lot of things in the nuclear industry and increasingly in other safety-related industries, can you write a document or a suite of documents called a safety case that demonstrate that society's expectations for safety, as captured and written down by the regulators, are met. If you can meet them, you can move forward. If you can't, we will walk away.
Thank you very much. We have another question. The stages in the MRSW process, is there anywhere in the world where that methodology has also been followed?
Not identically, but the process is similar. But it is very similar. I mean, when the process was being drawn up, there was a lot of the experience which was progressing because things were working very well at the time in Sweden and actually have moved forward very well in Sweden. So the process is quite similar to the process that's been followed in Sweden. And if you look at the process that's been followed now in Canada, where they're looking for a deep geological disposal facility, again, it is not identical, but it is very similar, and it certainly started. Their first stage was called Learn More, I think, and it involved an engagement with communities and talking with them about what hosting a geological disposal facility would involve before looking at the geology, and that happens in the second stage. From that point of view, they are similar to ours. The way it's panned out in Canada, they've had 21 expressions of interest and have decided to say that they can't deal with any more until they've processed those. So there are international processes that are very similar to us that recognise the importance of engaging as the first stage with communities and then bringing in the geology. And as we've already heard, the geology and a geological assessment at a high level, and admittedly only a high level screening, was stage 2 in the MRWS process. If we move forward into stage 4, then the geology will kick in again and we'll have the more detailed exploration that you're looking for. The way the process has been mapped out, that happens in stage 4. So if you want that to happen and if the decision makers want that to happen, the way for it to happen is to move into stage 4. There's still a right of withdrawal, and I know that there's a lot of doubt about that, but I can assure you it's real. There's been so many commitments made about it, it would be impossible to ignore a right of withdrawal. So there isn't a commitment to host a geological disposal facility by moving into stage 4. There's just a commitment to participate in the siting process, the backup of the right of withdrawal, and that will then enable us to sit down, identify potential sites, engage with the communities in those sites, but also have a proper look at the geology and all the other environmental and important criteria. Although geology is important, we've heard today, and I entirely agree, the effect, or making sure there isn't an effect on any of these protected sites is also vitally important. And that is something that will be tested as we move through stage 4, if that's the decision that's taken.
Councillor, it's a very simple question, really, and I'm really not sure of the answer, and I hope you could enlighten me. Is the repository that's envisaged, is this going to be a tidying up process whereby the stuff that's been left for the 40s, 50s, 60s and 70s, which is inherently unstable now, and is an ongoing process to try and make it safe, is this the stuff that's going to be put below and that's it? Or are we going to start shipping stuff from the other nuclear power stations around the country, and then where does it stop? Does it go beyond that? This is and I'm really not sure of the answer to that.
We know the answer.
Anybody?
Yeah, well, I think I can give I think there is a clear answer. I mean, if you read the white paper, and it's available on the DEC website, it makes it very clear that this is a geological disposal facility for UK wastes. From all UK sites. Scotland's a bit of a special case, but...
Can I just point out there are 4 tonnes of German plutonium that have find their way into, and they will find their way into the waste inventory very shortly. Right now you've taken them, you've been paid to take them, and this 4 tonnes of German plutonium is likely to become waste in the, once we've forgotten about this process. So it's not just UK waste.
Well, okay, at the moment, that German plutonium, which is at Sellafield anyway, that the UK government has taken title to, so it does now own it, is not a waste. The intention is that all of the plutonium stocks at Sellafield will be reused. That is now emerging as the government policy. And there are some finer points around the edges around a process called waste substitution, whereby we don't actually, where there's waste in this country that's foreign owned, we don't send them back exactly the waste they own, we send them back some equivalent, in radioactivity terms, waste. But if you take these sort of issues around the edges, the intention of this disposal facility is for UK waste from across the country, from the legacy waste that you've described. This isn't part of a tidying up process. You've probably heard the National Audit Office came up and visited Sellafield and had an inquiry up at Energis into some of what are called the legacy facilities at Sellafield. The waste is being taken out of those facilities and packaged and put into safe form, into a form that will be suitable for geological disposal, that process of taking the waste out of those decaying facilities isn't being held up waiting for a disposal facility. The waste will be taken out, packaged, and then stored at Sellafield until there's a disposal facility available. So this project in itself isn't part of the tidying up the Sellafield site and dealing with the legacy waste. That's happening anyway, but it is part of providing a long-term secure solution to the waste at Sellafield and elsewhere, rather than indefinite surface storage, which the group that did the recommendations that led to the white paper, Committee on the Radioactive Waste Management, concluded that geological disposal of these wastes was the best thing to do.
Commercial terms in tatters at the moment, but there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever that our UK nuclear new build strategy at the moment is concentrated upon sticking waste under the Lake District. All the waste. That's what our country's strategy is geared towards at the moment.
Thank you, John.
At a recent drop-in session at Spand held in Silla, you suggested that the 15 million tonnes of toxic Mercia mudstone spoil excavated could actually be dumped in the Irish Sea, rather than it being stored in bunds on the surface. Do you think this is a responsible approach to take?
I did suggest that as part of the options that we would need to look at for how to deal with the spoil, and whether it's the Mercia mudstones if the GDF was developed at Silith, or whether it was the rocks that would come out wherever it's developed, we would need to look at all options. And if it was the environmentally friendly thing to do, and there was no other waste use for the waste, we would consider disposing of it at sea. The sea is a protected environment. There are restrictions on what you can put in the sea and very stringent controls on that, and of course we would comply with those controls. But of course we would look at all the options for dealing with the spoil, and disposing of it at sea may be one of those, and if that ends up being the best option, that's the one that we want to use.
Another question from...
My name's Angela Jackson. I'm an independent lawyer and council taxpayer in Cumbria. My question is about the voting procedure. I understand only a small proportion of the councillors are going to take this vote, and the majority will not be voting. Why is that? And where Mr. Ellis mentioned a referendum, could you comment on how and when that may take place?
James first, and then Alan.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't profess to be an expert on local government law, but I do know that the local authorities I think have all said that they've taken legal advice and that the decision, I'm not quite sure why, but the decision has to be taken by their cabinet. They're all saying the same thing. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but that's what they're saying. I do know that there are a lot of county councillors in Cumbria who've spoken to me who would very much like to participate in a vote. I've been told that if it had gone to a vote at the last full council meeting, it was probably unlikely to get through. And I was told that by a cabinet member. Now, how the cabinet will vote at the end of the month, who knows? As far as the referendum is concerned, my own cynicism in this regard is that the people who are driving this process will try and limit the scope of the referendum to an area where they can win the vote. And I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist in political terms to work that out. So the chances of us getting a referendum within Cumbria are, I would say now, knowing what I know about the process and some of the people behind it, virtually nil.
A web debate, and Elaine Woodburn, the leader of Copeland, was one of the panellists on that, and the question of the referendum came up, and Elaine said that she thought it was very likely, and I agree with that, that at some stage during this process, if it moves forward, there will need to be a referendum.
I think you'll find that her view on a Cumbria-wide referendum might be a bit different.
I think that's exactly the point. That there are all sorts. It sounds very simple and straightforward. Yes, we'll have a referendum, but it raises all sorts of issues. What are the questions you ask? Who's allowed to vote? You know, what area do you do it in? You know, is it only residents who are allowed to vote, or do people have holiday homes have a vote? You know, and there's all sorts of issues around a referendum, but it may well be that at the right time in the process, that is and becomes a useful tool to make sure that as we take this forward, that we have got the support of the local community.
It's supposed to, the whole process is geared around a community. That's what your whole strategy revolves around. So if there's doubt about what the relevant community is for the purposes of essentially taking the process forward, you've just shot yourself completely in your own foot, mate.
Well, no, at the moment...
Ouch. Now, come on, no, hang on. You've said, no, hang on a minute. You're sitting here, very urbane, this, that, and the other. We're not daft, you know. None of us in this room are daft. We all know what's going on here. We all know that this process is being manipulated. And it's been manipulated by politicians who favour political expediency. And I appreciate you're just doing your job, Alan, and I have nothing against you personally. But quite frankly, this is an outrage. We are not a willing community. Nowhere in the Lake National Park is a willing community. Nowhere in the whole of Cumbria is a willing community. And if there were a referendum now, I know which way Cumbria would vote. Well, and you'd be out of a job. Or rather, you'd be looking in East Anglia.
We'd be looking elsewhere.
You'd be in East Anglia, mate, I tell you. That's where you'd be moving down there.
Okay, John, can I respond?
I'm not going to attempt to defend the local politicians that we all elect, and you know they I'm sure can come and defend themselves. But I would just like to pick up on the reason at the moment we can't have a referendum around or based on potential host communities is because we haven't been through the process of identifying where the sites may be, so we don't know what the potential communities are.
I think we need to be slightly more honest with people here. I mean, frankly, the person sitting just to your right has identified 3 potential host, in fact, he called them rock volumes, but a rock volume a rock volume equals a site, given you can't move the rock. So the person sitting to your right says that, you know, why don't we ask the people in those areas, what do people in Silleth think of the idea of hosting this, and people in the Solway Plain? What do people in Endale think of this?
Absolutely.
It's pretty clear.